Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Saturday morning Zoom mini class. We are in for lots of fun today. Last week, we did our little Father's Day pocket cards, so I'm not going to revisit Father's Day today, but maybe just a little bit in that we're going to make two cards today. We're going to do a his version and a hers version. The format that we're going to do is fairly simple and straightforward, but I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts and my thought processes when I go to make a masculine card versus a feminine card. And you'll see through the things that I show you, it doesn't have to be difficult, but I'm going to give you 4 things to think about when you're making one of these cards. And of course, as always goes with card making, or even with scrapbooking, you kind of have to know your audience. If you're sending it to someone who likes big, bright, bold colors, you can play into that. If you're making a layout that is very, outdoorsy and that kind of thing, the lumberjack theme is still very much on trend and definitely skews masculine. And I very specifically steered away from that today because to me, that's kind of it's a little bit obvious. If you want masculine, buffalo plaid is 100% an amazing go-to for masculine cards, layouts, projects, that kind of thing. But sometimes it is a little bit trickier. So today I chose Tula and Norbert's birthday line. And I did that specifically because they have a his version and a hers version. And I'm going to show you within that same paper line how things differ. So the first thing when you're looking at making a feminine card versus a masculine card is looking at color. And if you notice, I'm going to pull the 2 cut apart sheets here. The most obvious things is the color choices that they've done for the Tula version and the Norbert version, or the her version versus the his version. The girl versions, and this is very common throughout many paper lines, is the pinks, the teals, the purples. That's a very, very simple way of skewing feminine versus, say, on the boy version, you've got blues, you've got greens. Usually orange tends to be more on the masculine side, but you can see on both of these that orange and yellow are quite prevalent on both cards. So if you're just making cards in general and you're not, or making a layout in general and you're not sure whether you're going to use it, if you want it more masculine or feminine, orange and yellow are great middle ground colors. And then again, sometimes with teals and blues, it depends on the shade. Darker shades tend to skew more masculine. However, today I'm staying with the bright and cheerful. So that is where you're going to look at your first thing, which is color. The second thing you're going to look at is your patterns. So a few of us were chatting before that we started the recording today, and definitely with when you're doing a feminine card, flowers, lacy things, all of those really delicate, pretty things definitely tend to skew feminine. When you're looking at masculine cards, look at polka dots, look at stripes, look at bold, I'm going to say sharp graphics and that kind of thing. So square, and so today I've actually brought some circle punches as well, and I'll show you all this when we get making too. Girl stuff tends to be rounder, so circles, flowers, ovals. If you're trying to take something and make it masculine, make it a triangle, make it a diamond, make it a square, sharp corners versus round corners. That's a great, easy way to keep them looking different. But even within the stripe realm, so I'm going to show you these 2 papers. And again, I chose these pretty specifically. This is the girl paper, but the stripe has a roundness to it, whereas this is nice, sharp, crisp. Well, in this case, it's horizontal, but of course we could turn it vertical as well. So when you're looking at shapes, look at round versus sharp. sorry, and I'm now skipping ahead. So we talked about color, we talked about pattern. I then just talked about shape. And then the fourth thing is talking about texture. And I'll get into that a little bit more as we get making, because that's a little bit easier to explain when I'm actually showing you something. But roughing up the edges, using more of a grit paste or something textured on your masculine cards. It'll all come clear once we start creating. So let's go ahead and start doing our fun fold, because I did promise you a fun fold as well. And this one is pretty simple, but really fun as well. So I have chosen a red card base and a pink card base. With my masculine card, his card is going to be red. My hers card is going to be pink. So that brings in our first thing to consider, which is color. We do need to do a little bit of cutting. So I've already got my 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card base made, but we're going to do one additional cut. What we're going to do is on this front panel, we're going to cut away the top half of the card base. And you're questioning me right now. Have faith and go with me. So I've got my card base. I'm going to turn it this way and open it up. Halfway along the 5 1/2 inch mark is 2 3/4. And I know I forgot to say this off the top, but if you have questions, please feel free to unmute yourself at any time and ask. If I'm going too fast, also tell me to slow down, because today I've got tons of ideas and sometimes I get carried away with that. Okay, so we're going to measure across at 2 3/4. And we're only going to trim down to the fold. So you're not going all the way through, you're just going right to the fold. Like so. I actually accidentally went a little bit over the fold, but that's not going to affect anything. I'm now going to turn it back this way, and I'm just going to cut along that fold so that top little panel comes out. You can either eyeball it, or it should be at the 4 1/4 mark. And that should just pop right out. And just to give you a sneak peek of where we're going, because I've received that feedback that people like to know where we're going, especially when I don't have a prototype to show you. So we've cut that top piece off. This is actually just going to flip around. And this is actually called a Dutch door fold, which I'm not really sure why it's called that, but it's kind of fun and very easy to make without needing a whole lot of extra supplies. So that top panel is just going to flip around and now become a decorative element on your card. To do it again the second time for our his card, it's always good to practice a second time as well. So I'm going to line it up at 2 3/4. I'm going to trim only down to the fold. There we go. And then I'm going to rotate it around and trim off that top along the fold down to the cut. So now we have our 2 card bases all cut and ready to go. Bring that up a little bit closer. It's hard when it's tone on tone. I apologize for that, but we'll fix that up in just a second. So we have our 2 card bases ready. Now let's do a little bit of decorating, and we'll bring in some of those principles that I was talking about earlier, looking at pattern and looking at shape. So because we're going to be seeing the inside of the card, I'm actually going to cut a piece of pattern paper that's going to go inside the card and act as a bit of a background. So in typical fashion, where I would normally be putting this on the front, I'm going to cut a piece that is 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm going to go right ahead and I'm going to use my stripe paper for my his card. And I'm going to use that same but girly version of the stripe pattern on my her card. So first, let's cut at 4 inches. And I feel like I need a new blade on my trimmer, so I'll have to remember to do that afterwards. If you are ever having trouble with your trimmer, and you can see mine's got a little bit of fuzzies on it, I feel like my blade needs to be replaced, but it could just also be that my track is a little bit dirty. So you could just take a thumbtack or your piercing tool, but be gentle with that and clean out your track. I've got a X-Acto knife here. So that's just a little off-topic tip. Things you can look for if you're not getting nice clean cuts. Also remember, and see if I can get this up to the camera, your blade is triangle shaped. And if you find you are always a bottom to top cutter, that means only one side of your blade is really getting used. So you always have the option to turn your blade around, and that might get you a little bit of extra life as well. So just little tips off the side there. Okay, back to my paper. I cut this at 4 inches wide. I'm going to cut it down to 5 1/4 inches long. Yeah, that worked a little bit better. At least it felt better. So I'm going to tuck that over here. I'm going to do all my prep first because I want to show you a few other things that you can do to make it more his or hers version. While I have this paper here, I also want a piece of paper for this front little panel. And lucky enough, I've got a really fun pattern that coordinates with all my colors to go inside. So this I'm going to cut down to 2.5 by 4. We're already 4 inches wide, so I'll just cut it down to 2.5. And that will be ready here when we go. All right, repeat again for our her version. Now, I do have to be careful if I'm going to flip this one over because I have a directional pattern on this side. So if I want to do that same thing where I put a little bit on the front, I'm actually going to have to cut this a little bit differently. Dimensions are the same. I just have to be careful of my paper direction. So if you're ever cutting directional paper and that's what matters to you, make sure that that's the side that's facing up when you cut your paper so you know that you are doing it right. So I'm going to do 4 inches. Put my extra aside. Yeah, my blade is really fuzzy today. I am going to do my 5 1/4 first, and then I'm going to do my 2.5. So there we go. And this will now flip over and be my background with my balloons on the front, or you absolutely could do it the other way. Kind of like that better. And then that will go on the front. So now you're seeing a little bit more clearly how this extra panel is going to function on our card. Okay, I think let's go into some decorative elements and let's get these assembled thus far. So, I do excellent. Let's start with our masculine card. I talked about color, which we've chosen the red and the bold primaries. The yellow is still pretty dominant, but it's got all those wonderful coordinating primary colors. We've talked about patterns, so we've got our stripe going through here, and then party hats, I mean, is a pretty universal icon, but it looks fun when it all coordinates. Let's talk about shape and let's talk about texture. Since this is our his card, I'm going to keep my corners nice and square. I'm not going to do anything else to them from a cutting standpoint, but what I'm going to do is I am going to add some texture, and you can add texture literally or just visually, and I'll do both for you. So on my striped piece, I am going to start by just taking a little bit of ink I've got Barn Door here, which is a nice red distress ink. I'm using distress because it was small and easy for me to bring today, but any water-based dye ink will work for this technique. And I'm simply going to drag my ink on the sides of my paper. By doing this direct to paper, and I'll see if I can bring it up close. There we go. You can see that the ink marks look very sharp and scratchy, I guess is the best way to say it. So again, that gives you that visual impact of texture just by dragging your ink pad. And it's okay if you get big globs like this, because it just makes it look really rough and tumble. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on my yellow piece. And this just adds some depth and some dimension. And again, makes it look a little bit more rough. You can also add texture physically, I guess is the best way to say it. I have this little tool here that is called a distress tool. And if you look at it really closely, it's this little round circle that has, I'm going to call them blades, little razor blades almost poking through these little holes. So what you can do, and I usually just pull it towards me a little bit at a time, just kind of go along all the edges. And again, it gives you, let's see if I can get this in focus here. No, it's not going to focus. I can't. It gives you a really rough edge. Now, if you don't have one of these handy tools, you could use your scissors as well. Just please be careful that you don't cut yourself. So I'm going to take the edge of my blades and the same thing. I'm just going to drag it along the edge of my paper. Let's see if I can. This is hard to, but see how it's a little bit rough along the edges? So here we are physically adding texture to our paper. For a feminine card, and when I get to the pink one, I will show you, I'm going to keep it a little bit smoother. And here we go. We'll just finish up that edge. And now it's all kind of chopped up. The other thing you can do, and I'm not going to do this if you don't like doing the edges, you could actually just crumple it up and then smooth it back out again, and you get some fun textures that way. So texture will help you, trying to think of the right wording, help you spin your card more masculine if you've got some nice sharp lines, some nice texture to your card. All right, same principles over here on our girly card. We kept our corners sharp here, so I am going to round my corners over here. If my corner rounder will work. There we go. So I'm gonna round that one up. You know what? It'll be fun if we round this up as well. Now I'm only going to do the two sides on the pink piece. So I will do the two sides. Oh, someone is saying a snippet from your milk bag is very similar to that. Absolutely. Use what you've got. I'm going to flip over here and do those corners so that'll fit in nicely. And you know what? Let's mirror that on the back of our card as well. Now, same thing applies if you are doing this for scrapbooking. If you are doing more of a feminine page, round the corners of your photos, round the corners of your photo mats, even round the corners if you've got a banner or a pennant that you're putting your title on. Adding roundness will soften it and make it look more feminine. Now, should we do this one? You know what? I'm going to leave this one square I may regret that down the road, but for right now, let's leave that one square. The second thing I did over here on my masculine card was that edge distressing. And I'm going to do the same thing here, but in order to make it softer, I'm going to use a little bit of a sponge. This is just from a nice big round sponge that I have that I cut into little wedge pieces. You could also use your blending foams on a tool. I don't seem to have one in my bin here. Yeah, I'm going to stick with, no, I'm going to switch over. I'm going to do peacock feathers because it's bringing in that little bit of teal, and it might help you see a little bit better as well. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to take my wedge. I'm just going to get some ink on it, and I'm going to just color the edges of my paper. And this is going to make it pop out, but by using the sponge, you don't get those lines like we did with the directed paper drag. And clearly I had some ink on my thumb, so I've got a little bit all over the place. But that's just an opportunity for embellishment. And let's go ahead and do it on the pink one as well. If you don't like holding it, you can also do it this way. I personally just find I get a little bit more control if I'm holding it, but everybody has a different style, and it's all going to end up with the same kind of look. Okay, let me see if I can hold these two up to the camera so you can see the difference. So again, here is our red one. Is that going to help? So again, you can see the sharp lines, the scratchiness compared to the softness of using the sponge. And it just gives you a different look. And then, like I said, from a physical texture standpoint, I'm going to leave my pink ones smooth instead of roughed up. But another way you could add texture is if you had embossing folders. So a pretty floral embossing folder versus more of a wood grain embossing folder will also give you texture. All right, let's quickly put these guys together, and then we can add something on this little card, and I will talk to you about a little bit more about shape. Okay, tape runner. Here it is. So let's attach. There we go, get it started. Just center it all the way around. If you need to, open up that way so you can see better. And let's put our background piece down. Okay, so that one's ready to go. We'll just put that there so we don't lose it. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it like that. There we go. Put that one on the front. Excellent. So our cards are starting to come together. So now I'm going to go back to those cut apart sheets. And I'm going to find something to go on the front here. Okay, so on the front of my cards, on these little panels here, I am going to use this one for my boy card, and I am going to use this one here for my girl card. So I'm going to just quickly cut those out to make some space. Get those cut down. And so right now these little cards are 3 by 4. That is a little bit big for, I said the surprise one, didn't I? That is a little bit big for the little piece of paper that we got, but I'm going to show you some tricks. Okay. No, I'm going to switch to this trimmer because that one's fuzzy. All right, for our boy card, we've already got some nice sharp edges, but you don't always have to follow perfectly. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this little card down to a square. So I want it to be 2.5 by 2.5 because this is 2 3/4, right? Yeah. So that means I need to cut 1/4 of an inch off each edge because this is 3 inches. And flip it now to 2.5. And I need to cut it down. So I think, unfortunately, I'm going to lose "you want a piece of me," but I can add that somewhere else. And then if I go 2.5 here, yeah, I'm going to get a little bit of those sprinkles and icing. And that's ready there. And that can go down there. But talking about shape, on my girl side, I am going to take my punch and I'm going to punch Tula as a circle. I need to cut her down just a little bit. I know I'm not using, or you know what? Here, let's do it this way. I've got a scallop circle, which is even better. That worked. So on my little cards, I now have something that's even more girly. This one is more masculine with the sharp edges, but to even make it more fun, let's put them on a jaunty angle. We've got my sentiment here. I'm going to have to grab a sentiment maybe out of here for Tula. What was this? This was celebrate. Let's add make a wish as well. Okay. You want a piece of me. Let's ink up that edge so that it matches with the rest of our card. And we'll do that too. Tape runner. We said jaunty angle for our square. And let's be fun with our sentiment too. We'll put him on an opposing angle. And now this piece is simply going to get attached to that front, let's call it the door piece of our card base. And because these guys are on angles, I'm going to keep this piece straight. And remember, you're only going to put tape on the bottom half, because if you put it on the top half, it's going to attach to the inside of your card too, which we do not want. And stripes are awesome in the background because it'll help you make sure you're straight. Okay. Card number 1 is almost done. Let's come back here. Because she's got a nice white background, I think in this case, I'm not going to ink her. But let's do the corner rounding. And now that I've done it, I'm not sure that I like it, but you'll get the idea. I need I think a slightly smaller. So maybe this one, I'm just going to do the tops. That's stuck again. So I'm going to put my sentiment at the bottom. Oh, I guess I'm going to have to because it's going to show. That's not too horrible. Let's do, no, we'll keep it flat. That. And now Tula is going to go up here. And now she can go onto the front of our card. Oh, and look at what I just did. I put tape on the top. And now it's going to stick to the inside of my card. So now we have to improvise. I'm going to go back. Fortunately, I still have some of these scraps. I am going to cut 2.5 by 4. That's already 4, but I want it vertical this time. I might be lucky. See, never mistakes, just opportunities to embellish. I can get that down to 4. Let's quickly ink it up. Sometimes you just get creating and you don't think. But you can always fix it. Okay. Let's try this again. So I want Tula on the top, tape on the bottom. And there we go. I'm going to talk to you about one last thing that I didn't have on my original list of things to think about, but it might be pretty obvious. If you want to add embellishments like enamel drops, dots, or things like Nuvo, glitter definitely gives you more of a girly feel. But that doesn't mean that you can't add certain things to a masculine card. So for example, I have my glossy accents, and I'm going to use that on my candles to give them a little extra shine. Because boys can have bling too. They just maybe don't want sparkly bling. And then let's just do some little dots. And this will dry really nice and clear. We'll do a big one. But still give you some sparkle, some shine, and some excitement. They look really milky now, but like I said, glossy accents, when they dry perfectly clear. My one little guy has a bubble here, so let's see if we can. There we go. And then I'm going to use glitter on Tula. Let's do some sparkly dots. In those corners. So I think that's it from me today. It's always nice to kind of see these two kinds of cards side by side. They really are the exact same card with just some of those modifications to keep in mind. So we've got stripes, texture with the rough edges and the sharp ink distressing. We've got clear embellishments. We've got squares and rectangles and stripes. Where over here, we've got circles and rounded corners and pink colors and smoother textures to make it look a little bit more feminine. And hopefully that gives you some thought while you're going to make masculine cards or feminine cards. I mean, you might see a sample that is this absolutely stunning masculine card, but you want to girlify it. Well, all of those same techniques work in reverse. So thank you very much for tuning in today for our His and Hers card. It's a simple fun fold that you can absolutely modify. And then, you know what? It would kind of look fun going like this way as well. So don't be stuck doing it in a vertical way. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, we invite you to share your creations with us, either in our Papercrafts Inner Circle VIP group, or you can email them to me. I'd love to see them. And with your permission, I can share that in the group as well. So have a fantastic weekend and enjoy the sunshine outside.